I'm Andrew Friedson. I am currently the president of the Montgomery County Council. I also chair the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, which I serve alongside Natalie Fani-Gonzalez and Will Giwando. We do have some representatives. We have Val Carranza from Councilmember Glass's office. We have representatives from Lorianne's sales office and Lanai Wells, I believe, is here. Yes. Great. And we also have, I think Lisa Mandel-Trupp is here as well from Councilmember Balcom's office. And she just raised her hand, so thank you. And then we have a number of representatives from the Planning Department and the Planning Board, as well as the Planning Board Chair, who you're going to hear from in a minute. Just want to note, we're here to receive an overview of the Planning Board's recommendations. You're going to hear from Director Sartori to share a PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. I just want to note these are recommendations that were transmitted to the Council this past spring after working on attainable housing for several years. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee held 3 different briefings over the summer on the Planning Board's recommendations. The goal was to give residents time to learn about them and to process them and not rush the process, and also allow for the Council to understand them and to process them as well. I want to reiterate there is no legislation that is currently before us. These listening sessions are not public hearings. There will be a time when legislation is introduced where the formal legislative process will take place. This is above and beyond and in addition to the formal legislative process prior to any formal legislation before us. The purpose of these sessions is to hear from you and to collect feedback, to understand questions that you may have as part of our deliberation and discussion over these issues and our understanding of these recommendations. Pam Dunn, one of the Council's senior analysts, is staffing this issue. She is here and will be listening in on what you have to say along with colleagues and making sure that we're keeping track of questions and comments and getting follow-up on them for the Council. The topic at hand tonight is a serious one, the housing challenges that we face. We have done a lot in the county and particularly on the County Council over the last several years to try to address the housing challenge, both in affordability and accessibility of housing and market rate housing, as well as affordable housing as well. We realize that there is no neighborhood in Montgomery County that is more affordable today than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I talk a lot about as someone who grew up here, that there is no person in Montgomery County who grew up in a home in Montgomery County who with the same job, the same career as their parent or parents could afford to live in the same home as their parent or parents. And that is something that we need to have a lot of tools to address. This is intended to be one tool in the toolkit and something that we look forward to hearing from you tonight. The Planning Board has recommended these series of attainable housing strategies. There are 3 major proposals. Director Sartori is going to go through them for you very briefly tonight, and then we look forward to hearing from you. Again, there's no legislation before us, but we're here to collect feedback and understand your thoughts and your concerns. So let me now turn it over to my colleague and your district council member, Natalie Fani-Gonzalez, who also serves with me on the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee and chairs the Economic Development Committee.
Thank you so much, Council President Friedson. Before I start, I'm gonna ask a question in Spanish. ¿Quién aquí no habla inglés? ¿Usted no habla inglés? Sube la mano si no habla inglés. Ok. ¿Uno solo? Ok, él. Ok. ¿Usted habla poco inglés? Me hace un favor, ¿será que se puede poner allá y le vamos a traducir? ¿Está bien? Y así. Ok, Claudia, ¿qué otra persona? ¿Alguien más no habla inglés? Ok, sí me hace... Allá, mire, con la señora... Levanta la mano. La señora que está levantando la mano allá. Por favor, ¿la ves? Mil gracias. Okay, I was asking who didn't speak English also. Okay, again, I'm gonna speak slow. Speak slow. I'm just gonna say, you too. Again, my name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm proud to be your council member. I am very passionate about housing. It's a human right, and we do need to have more housing for people of all income levels, okay? There's no piece of legislation, and I know the council president mentioned that a minute ago, but I would like to say it once again. We are collecting comments based on the planning board's recommendation that you're gonna be seeing here. I wanna make sure that everybody has an opportunity to succeed and to have a place to go home near their job. Okay, that's the goal. And I am going to say that in Spanish, sorry. Mi nombre es Natalie, y I'm very thankful to Univision for being here. Thank you for Univision for being here today. Estamos aquí tratando con una conversación sobre la vivienda, de asegurarnos de que en el condado de Montgomery exista vivienda para personas de todo tipo de clase en términos de cuánto dinero ganan. Estamos colectando data y colectando comentarios para poder así crear una legislación que sea responsable. And with that, I'm not going to say anything else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to listening to your comments.
Thank you very much. As mentioned, Univision is here, just so everyone is aware. We also have the council here recording, and we are doing simultaneous translation, as you just heard from Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez. Let me turn it over to Planning Board Chair Artie Harris.
Thank you, Council President Friedson, and thank you, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez. I'm Artie Harris. I'm chair of the Planning Board for Montgomery County. The Planning Board is an independent agency with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, also called MNCPPC. The Planning Board members are appointed by the County Council. The Planning Board incorporates community input and the expertise of Montgomery Planning and Montgomery Parks to make independent and informed decisions that will enhance the quality of life within our communities. We're guided by our new general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. A core is more housing of all types for all people. In June, the board approved and transmitted to the County Council the Attainable Housing Strategies. As Council President Friedson said, it's just one of the tools we can use to help address a big, huge housing shortage in our county. We're not building enough housing fast enough to keep up with the demand or anticipated growth in the county. This crisis threatens our economic viability and the quality of life within the county. Our middle-income class is shrinking. 26,000 middle-income earners have left the county since 2005. They are moving out of the county to places with more affordable and available housing, or families simply aren't moving here at all. This includes teachers, firefighters, nurses, and even our own children and grandchildren who want to build their careers and start families in Montgomery County but can't find housing here. We can do better. Attainable housing strategies alone won't solve our housing problems, but can help by allowing more families to build more housing, and specifically more types of housing along the county's major growth corridors. These proposals address the county's urgent need for housing, especially for people and families who have too much income to qualify for affordable programs, but still struggle to afford to live in Montgomery County. To be clear, this is not a mandate for people to turn their properties into duplexes. It would simply provide property owners a path to build something else aligned with the community's existing character and give people more options to stay here. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Jason Sartori, who's the Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair Harris. So good evening. I'm really happy to be here this evening. I love this building. I've voted here. I've come here, brought my daughter here to get her COVID vaccine, and it's great to be here to talk about housing tonight. Before I begin, I want to share my housing story with you all. I actually grew up in New York, spent the first several years of my life with my parents living in a couple of different accessory dwelling units up there. And then as an adult, I've lived in a couple of different garden-style apartments, one outside of Richmond, Virginia, one outside of Providence, Rhode Island. Moved then to Baltimore, lived in the heart of downtown Baltimore, where I lived in a high-rise apartment building. and then moved finally to Montgomery County in 2002, when my wife and I bought a townhouse just down the road here at the Forest Glen Metro Station. We now live, in 2009, we moved to Bethesda, where I live in a single-family home. So I encourage each of you, within the 30 seconds that you have to provide comments and questions, try to, if you are comfortable, share your housing story when you provide your thoughts and comments on our recommendations here. So I'll start at the very beginning. In March of 2021, the County Council asked the Planning Board and the Planning Department to, in a letter that you see here, specifically to recommend zoning reforms that would allow greater opportunities for missing middle housing in Montgomery County. The resulting effort was what we call attainable housing strategies. Now, the original letter suggested that we should get our recommendations to the council within 2 months. Right, yes. So, but we've actually, here we are, more than 3 years later, just earlier this summer, we sent along our recommendations finally. That extra time that we got afforded us the opportunity to do more outreach, more engagement, to talk to other jurisdictions that are doing similar work, to do more research, and to kind of hone our recommendations to the county council. When we started, we had 3 primary goals in mind. The first was to increase opportunities to meet the county's diverse housing supply needs. You heard Chair Harris talked about we're losing our middle income population. If you take a look around the county, we have a lot of single family homes, we have a lot of multifamily high rise, but we don't have a lot of housing that's in the middle range there. So this is, we have quite diverse needs, and just even as I talked about my kind of housing story and how in different stages of my life I've lived in different types of housing, we don't really have as many of those options here now in Montgomery County. The second was to unravel the exclusionary aspects of the county's single-family residential zones. I'm going to show some data about this later in the presentation. Council President Friedson talked about how every single neighborhood is less affordable today than it was 20, 25 years ago. I'll show you some of the data about that. And lastly, to create more opportunities for home ownership for more households in more parts of the county. So why are we doing this now? First and foremost, not on the screen here, is that we had to fulfill that obligation we had, the request from the county council. But we also, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, the county adopted Thrive Montgomery 2050, our new general plan. And the general plan creates the framework and policy guidance for us to be diversifying our housing stock. Now, I want to point out that Thrive was not the first policy document in the county to actually call for us to do that. In 2011, the county adopted its housing element to our old general plan. This was a requirement from the state to have a housing element. That housing element used a lot of the same language that we have in Thrive about creating more diverse types of housing in more parts of the county. Next, many jurisdictions, including folks right across the river in Arlington and other places across the country, have adopted similar changes, and it puts us in good company in what we're trying to do here. When I say all across the country, it's all across the country, from North Carolina to Oregon to Massachusetts, Montana, Oklahoma, Texas, everywhere. Jurisdictions are taking a look at their single-family zones to try to see how we can have more diverse types of housing in those zones. Interestingly, it's not just small local jurisdictions, it's also states, and we even see the Biden administration encouraging jurisdictions to be doing stuff like this. And the Harris campaign is talking about stuff like this as well. The county has a significant housing supply issue. Even a modest increase in our housing supply can help reverse the trends that we're seeing in affordability. And lastly, there's a significant equity component. This is just the right thing to do. Now, the Planning Department adopted its equity agenda for planning a few years back, and at the core of it, we recognize that the role that we've played in our policies and our plans from generations ago in creating the racial inequities that we have in Montgomery County. Attainable housing strategies is an effort for us to be able to break down some of the barriers and create more opportunities for members of our community who have been historically disadvantaged. So that is part of why we're doing this as well. So I'm going to show a little bit of data here that underpins what we're talking about. This shows the average size of single-family detached homes in Montgomery County by decade built. So you have 1950s all the way at the left, and the current decade all the way here on the right. And what you can see is current new homes are 2.5 times the size of homes built in the 1950s. And so as homes are being torn down and replaced, we're losing some of the homes that are this size, and they're being replaced with homes that are nearly 4,000 or more square feet. And you can imagine there's a price implication with that. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the impact that size has on pricing for homes. First, I'm going to read the top line here that in 2023, so last year, the average detached home in Montgomery County sold for $970,000. In contrast, attached homes, condos, townhouses, co-ops, sold for an average of $440,000. So let's look at the distribution of these. This, in blue, are our single-family detached home sales from last year. They're all towards the right side, high end of the spectrum here. The green bars are our attached single-family homes. These are our townhouses. So you can see we start to get a few more. I think the largest share is here in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. And then when we throw in our condos and co-ops, you can see that they're even further down the scale. The largest piece is here in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. So you can see the impact that the size of a unit and whether or not it's attached or detached plays in pricing. So I want to talk about that exclusivity that we're seeing in our neighborhoods. Again, emphasizing that every single neighborhood is more exclusive today than it was 20 years ago. So here we're looking at the typical home. Now this is this zip code, 20902 here in Wheaton. The typical home from the year 2000 today would be $304,000. However, home prices here did not inflate at the same rate as our incomes or as other goods. The actual typical home in Wheaton today, or in 2022, the latest year that we have these data, was $537,000. So what does that mean in terms of who can afford this? If homes had still been like they were in 2000 here, you'd only need $68,000 in household income annually to be able to afford that typical home. But instead, now you need $119,000, nearly twice as much annual income to be able to afford a home here in Wheaton. This shows you the percentage of county residents, county households, so not Wheaton households, but county households that can afford to buy the typical home here. In 2000, the 2000 price, nearly 3/4 of households in Montgomery County could afford to live in Wheaton. Now it's down to only 50%. And this is a trend we're seeing in every single zip code, and some of them are much more dramatic than this. Some are a little bit less, but they're all becoming more and more exclusive, affordable to fewer, attainable to fewer and fewer households. Attainable. This was the median home sales price, or median home value from 2000 inflated to current dollars, $304,000. Now it's $537,000 actually. So this is why households in Montgomery County, only half of our households can afford to live in Wheaton now. So what are we proposing? Just to give you kind of a sense visually, this house that you see on the left, this is a torn down, rebuilt house in Montgomery County that could be built today in any of our single family zones. So pretty much a third of the county. When we say it's permitted today by right, that means you could go to the Department of Permitting Services if you own this property. You can get a permit to demolish the home that's there today, and you can get a permit to build this, and you're done. You can go ahead and get your home built. What you can't do is build the same exact building, same size, same setback from the street, same setback and distance from your neighbors, same lot coverage, and have it be 2 units. Department of Permitting Services. So you can't do this, even though it's the same exact building as what we have on the left. This is a photoshopped image because this doesn't exist. We can't do this, so we photoshopped the door onto here. Just to show you that this is a duplex, and you can't do that today at all. If you tear down your home, the only thing you can do... We'll talk about that. We'll get to that. Yeah. we will. It'll be really, we'll have plenty of time for questions. I want to try to get through this so that everyone gets a chance to understand what it is that's been recommended. So these are geographically, this is a map of the county and the 4 zones that we're talking about. These are our single family zones, R40, R60, R90, and R200, all the areas in yellow. You'll also hear me talk about our Thrive growth corridors. These were not corridors that were identified through attainable housing strategies. These were identified through our general plan. Our general plan identifies these as the areas where over the coming decades we want to concentrate the growth in the county around these corridors. And lastly, you'll hear me talk about the priority housing district. So the priority housing district combines those last 2 maps in a way. It's everything that was within 500 feet of one of those Thrive corridors and within 1 mile of a metro station, a Purple Line station, or a MARC rail station in those 4 zones. It's the areas that you see in the bright blue. Okay, so our recommendations come at 3 different scales and have 3 different methods of or approaches to them and 3 different geographic targets. The small scale, this is where we would allow duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in those 4 zones in certain areas. So again, I want to point out, similar to detached homes, we're keeping the same setbacks, the same height restrictions, and the same lot coverage restrictions as exist today for single-family homes. This would apply in the R40, R60, and R90. You could build duplexes and triplexes everywhere. And in the priority housing district, that bright blue I showed you, you could build quadplexes under the planning board's recommendation. In the R200 zone, this is the zones that are further out, larger lot parcels. That's where duplexes would be allowed everywhere, and triplexes and quadplexes would be allowed in the priority housing district in the planning board's recommendation. An important thing to note is that this would be allowed by right. You can go to the Department of Permitting Services and get a permit to do this. However, with one caveat, you need to be in conformance with a pattern book. The pattern book will demonstrate how on different size lots, in different zones, in different configurations, you can get the house, the massing of the house, how you would place it on the property, how you would locate parking on the site, how it interacts with the street front, and then other neighborly house details, things like how you would place a sunroom or a porch if you wanted to put that on the duplex or triplex. The next scale is the medium scale. This is where we're talking about a little bit higher density. These are townhouses, stacked flats, which are like 2-over-2s, where you might have a 2-story unit over a 2-story unit, and small apartments. These are only recommended to be allowed within 500 feet of those growth corridors. And it would be through what we call the optional method of development. So the optional method is where we allow a property owner to build at a higher density in exchange for a public benefit or good. In this case, the public benefit is a guarantee of smaller units that are more affordable. So the maximum average size that we've recommended, the planning board has recommended, is a 1,500 square foot unit. And the smaller you go from there, the more you can build. And then lastly, there's the large scale. Large scale is where we're talking about larger stacked flats, townhouses, smaller apartments, and larger apartments that might be 4 stories or taller. This is really focused in on certain segments of those Thrive growth corridors. However, we're recommending that this not be handled through our existing single-family zones, but instead be handled through a new set of zones that would be associated with corridors that capture the vision that we have for our growth corridors as complete communities where you can access things using bike lanes, and it's more pedestrian oriented. You've got access to transit that would be allocated to areas of the corridor through a master plan process. So this would not be something that would just be applied to existing single family homes or zones, rather through a master plan process. And then one last thing with regard to the priority housing district is a recommendation to reduce parking requirements. So if it's outside I'll tell you that today, current parking minimum is 2 spaces per unit. So if you build in a duplex, you can't do that today because they're not allowed, but if you were, you'd have to put 4 spaces. If under the recommendations from the planning board, if you're building a duplex outside a priority housing district and there's no street parking available, then you would still be required to build a minimum of 4 on-site parking spaces. If there is street parking available, then there's a 50% reduction recommended to only 2 spaces for that duplex. If you're inside the priority housing district, again, that bright blue area of the map, and there's no street parking present, there's a 50% reduction recommended. And if there is street parking present, then it's a 75% reduction recommended, meaning you would only have to build 1 on-site parking space for the duplex. The idea here is as you get closer to the core of those corridors and near our metro stations and Purple Line stations, you have access to other modes of transportation, and you have other things within walking distance. So there's less of a reliance on cars in those areas. We see that today. We're also not planning for the 1950 or 2024. We're planning for a future where we hope to be less and less car dependent, especially in those areas near transit. So I just want to, these are the dates of our listening sessions. We'll put this up again at the end. We're here today. Next week, we're in White Oak. The week after that, we're in Germantown and Bethesda. And then we have a virtual session during the day on October 2nd. And one other event I want to let you know about is the planning board has been hosting a housing speaker series. We had one in July, an event in July. We have another panel coming up next Thursday, September 19th, where we're actually bringing in people from Oregon, Arlington County, Virginia, and St. Paul, Minnesota, to talk about their experience doing exactly what we're doing here. And so I encourage you to come out to that, ask questions. If you can't come in person, that event is at our Wheaton headquarters, right down the road here. If you can't make it to that, we'll also have that online, and people can participate and watch virtually or watch the recording. So with that, I do want to point out that QR code. If you saw it on at the beginning of the slide deck as well, you can scan that. That'll give you this PowerPoint, so you can have access to the PowerPoint on your phone.
Appreciate it. If you want, there's the QR code. You can scan it to have the presentation. We'll also, if you signed in, we'll send it to you electronically. So that's another option. Make sure you sign in if you'd like to get information after the fact. We're now going to open it up to questions. I did want to acknowledge that Suzanne from Councilmember Katz is here, and he is represented as well. We appreciate you joining us. We have Jordan, who's here. Jordan, raise your hand. With a microphone, she is going to go over and hand you the microphone. Again, if you could keep your comments and questions as brief as possible to get to as many people as possible, we would appreciate it. And Jordan's going to do her best to go left and right, back and front, so we can hear from as many people as possible. So with that, let's get to the questions and comments. And we are ready to go. Jordan?
Great. Thank you. With a show of hands. Okay, we have a gentleman here. I'll hold the mic for you. You can stand. Yeah, if you would like.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Aaron Droller. I live in Silver Spring. I do have a single-family house, and I'm grateful that I bought it when I did, because I would not be able to afford it today. It's not that I am against. I am in favor of increasing our housing supply. Let me put that out there. I am not in favor of this plan. I think that the way this plan is designed, the burden of all these duplexes and quadplexes are going to be on our neighborhoods. Developers are not going to buy houses in Bethesda and Kensington and Garrett Park. They're going to buy the old 1950s houses that are in Wheaton and Silver Spring and the east part of the county, and that's where these things are going to be built. So it's going to be our neighborhoods that have to solve this housing crisis. It's going to be our public schools that are bursting at the seams. My kids go to public schools. It's going to be our streets that have to assume this burden. So I think I understand why you're doing this, and I know equity is important to the county. This is not an equitable plan. This puts all the burden on our neighborhoods because our neighborhoods are the cheapest and the easiest to develop. So I oppose this plan. I also think the parking thing is ridiculous. This is a suburb, okay? You can't force people into using the bus. I use the bus and metro almost every day. I appreciate them. I use them. But the idea that everybody is just going to go on public transportation is ridiculous. This is a suburb. People need their cars. So, and I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just saying, and it's nothing personal, but I oppose this plan living here in Silver Spring. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
All right. By a show of hands, I'm going to work around the room. I see this gentleman here as well. I'll be back. You had your hand raised here. Okay, I'll hold this for you, okay?
Thanks. I agree that what is needed is affordable housing, but developers won't build the new housing unless they can make significant money through market rates. There are already more than 31,000 units in the development pipeline and another 80,000 plus units that are zoned for through the master planning processes, but developers aren't building them. So this upzoning, while well-intentioned, is not needed to allow the building of the housing that is needed. If you want more affordable housing, maybe, and developers won't build it, maybe you need to look at something like subsidizing affordable housing or making other kinds of changes. There are no requirements here for affordable housing, for more affordable housing. And to call it that when it's really a, quote, attainable is more honest. And by the way, smaller is not necessarily more affordable. There's naturally occurring affordable housing that comes with older housing that's in these neighborhoods that the other gentleman spoke about. Whereas replacing it with new housing, even if it's smaller, is going to be more expensive. Take a look at what's done in other jurisdictions like Arlington County. So I support the goal of more affordable housing, but it's getting it through zoning changes like this, and what it will have is a significant impact on our neighborhood communities because of increased burden on infrastructure, exacerbating the school overcrowding, the parking and road situation, et cetera. So
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much. Okay, we're going to work our way around the room here by a show of hands. I see I'm going to make my way this way. Thank you. Excuse me. How you doing tonight? I'll hold this for you, okay?
I'm great. My name is Genevieve McDowell Owen, and I was lucky enough to buy a single-family house. I lived in an apartment with my husband. We bought in 2001 for, I think it was a little over $200,000. And we put a lot of money into the house, but now it's worth like $1 million, which to me is kind of bananas. And so I'm in favor of this plan because what I would like to do, I'm an empty nester, my husband and I, and we would like to turn our house into a duplex so that my daughter can afford a home in this county. Because right now she can't. There's no way that any young person can afford a house in this county. And I would like to be able to turn it into a duplex. And if I could live in a duplex like my mom did in Jersey City growing up, she lived in a duplex with her parents. And they were able to share cars. And I'll be able to share cars with my daughter. We could have 2 cars like we have 3 cars now. But 2 families can share 2 cars. And I just think, and my small single-family neighborhood is graying. We have plenty of room in our brand-new school for more kids. I just think it's a really great idea. And I will finish with, I have not seen any alternate proposals. I keep hearing a lot of, yeah, but it's not going to be affordable, and yeah, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. I haven't seen any alternatives. Somebody who doesn't like this plan, show me an alternative to house our young people, to house the middle-class people that want to live near transit in our county.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
All right. I see a hand back here. Okay. How you doing? I'll hold this for you, okay?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Joy. I live nearby in a single-family house, and I wanted to echo this lady's over here since in my case, I'm a single person who bought a single-family home because when I was looking for something a little bigger than my 800-square-foot apartment, there was nothing. And, all of these houses I feel like are built for single families, and it's great that there are so many families, but I know that there are also people out there like me who are just one person and who would also like to turn their house into a duplex so that as I get toward retirement, I can share with some of my relatives who similarly are, the younger ones coming up are having a hard time finding anywhere to live. So I hear the concerns about this is going to hit our neighborhoods harder than, say, in Bethesda, but then the comment that I would have for the board and so on is, how do we make sure that in Bethesda the same kinds of incentives exists and that they don't somehow squirm out of it?
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna make my way around here. I saw a woman with her hand raised for a while here. How you doing, ma'am? I'll hold this for you, okay? You can stand if possible. I'll hold this for you.
Hi, I'm Monica Reyes, and I'm gonna read this. Attainable house, this actually affect me and many of the Latino community and Black community in the county. Affordable housing was not created for people of color like me. We, Latinos and Black, cannot afford apartment at market rate, but they are promoting housing for the poor, but instead this promotion is for the rich. This apartment prices will start at $800,000. This document is designed to take away our already affordable houses for housing opportunity for the rich. The HS12 take away our parking spaces. We need our trucks and cars to provide a service and get to feed our families. They want to create 15-minute walking community, which these people like us, Latinos and Black, can phantom to live in. The only reason to be there is cleaning apartment or working in restaurant. Have you ever taken in consideration the ratio of how many Latinos and low Black incomes living in Pike and Rose? We cannot even afford to eat there. They want to replace street parking with bicycle pad. We cannot afford to work 20 miles in a bicycle or carry our children or our groceries or our elderly relatives in bicycle. We are working class. We live much of Montgomery County. We count. We pay our taxes. The HHS seem to have a heavy undertone of racism against minority population. For this issue, we are against the upzoning of Montgomery County.
Thank you.
Thank you
I'll
for your
make my way
comments.
back over here. We're gonna come to this gentleman in the front. I saw his hand raised. How you doing, sir? I can hold this for you, okay? Great.
My name is Anthony Cross, and I've lived in the area since 1992. And my concern is what I see, all the development that's around the area, in the houses that are only just half a mile away, Twin Brook, subway station. These developers are building the townhomes and condos, and they're $400,000, $700,000, $800,000. But in the community around here, the duplexes that's considered Connecticut estates, they want to. I'm being bombarded with calls, and my home is not on the market, and I'm getting calls constantly trying to ask if I want to move out of my home, and I don't want to move out of my home because I'm always asking the people who are calling me, whomever, realtors or whoever, keep calling me and ask me about, do I want to sell my home? Well, give me $600,000 to $700,000. That's to say the least. This woman spoke about $1 million. These homes are worth that much. We live on a major bus line, near Metro, near everything that's convenient for us to be able to move and do what we do. Where else am I going to go in Montgomery County and get a home with this convenience without paying less than $600,000 or $700,000 for it? And then I'm concerned about the property taxes, that whatever's going on with the zoning that's going on, and they're increasing now, and they're nothing like what they used to be. And I know that some of my older neighbors who were here before I was here, their taxes is much lower. So I'm concerned about that problem and the congestion with the parking, and everybody knows that that's a major problem around here. And that's what my main concern.
Thank you for that, sir. Okay, thank
Thank you
you.
for your
We're going to
comments.
make our way. I see a The lady here, and I'll make my way there as well. How you doing? If you can stand, fine. If not, I have you here. I can hold the mic for you, okay?
I grew up in an apartment that was over a store. I had a sister. My grandma lived with us, my parents, and I'm not poor mouthing. We had enough to eat. It was all right. But of course, like many people, my dream was to have a home of my own and a yard someday. And finally, I got that in the 80s with my parents living with me. I had to pay 11% interest to get my house in Aspen Hill. And after 3 years, I refied down to 7.25, and I paid it off so I could have equity in my old age. Now, I'm white, but I kind of believe Hispanic people and black people have that same dream. And that dream can be fulfilled by the houses that your plan will tear down. Because we're all getting constant offers. They want to pay as is, and they want to do a tear down and take away that future equity opportunity from working class people. I have a big problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for your comments.
Okay. All right. Hello, sir. How are you? I can hold this for you. I'll make my way back over here, okay?
Hi, my name's Luis. I'm young. I've recently moved to this area. I've only been here about a year, but I really like what I've been seeing out of Wheaton. And I do want to say that I support this plan, and I think that's an opinion a lot of people my age are seeing. My housing story is that I started in, I am from Illinois originally, and so my parents, growing up in the Chicagoland suburbs, right? So I'm very familiar with suburbs, but we started out in an apartment when I was very young. We moved into townhouse. After that townhouse, after like 7 years, we moved into another townhouse. And then finally, after high school, I graduated, my parents were able to move into a single-family home. And while I do respect the fact that they were actually able to get equity, I think there are definitely a lot of issues with single-family zoning as it is right now. I mean, we do need to densify things, and I think there are some things that I am concerned about with this plan. For example, it's not a focus on affordability. It's about attainability, which that's still good. That's a step in the right direction. But we really do need to make these opportunities for lower-income people. Make it actually affordable and make incentives for people to, for developers to build in the interest of everyone instead of in the interest of themselves. I do want to say that I've looked at the rest of the MoCo 2050 plan, and I do like what I have been seeing, right? It's not just this, it's one piece in the puzzle where we're trying to expand, ways of getting around the city because, during college, I was able to live in a very fortunate part of the country called Urbana, Illinois, and it is a college town, yes, but I think what they have there going on is really, really nice. The suburbs there are really beautiful, and it's a lot of diverse, duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes. I mean, even 10-unit apartment buildings, and it's all really close to each other. And there's not as much parking, but also people got around it because it was such a small scale to move around the community. I didn't need a car. I just biked around everywhere. There was also good buses, and right now, as they currently exist, they're not great, but if we densify, then there's more just cause to actually pour more funding into these, pour more thought and planning into making these just more accessible, more convenient, more reliable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I see a hand raised here. I'm going to make my way over, okay? How you doing?
Thank you. Hi, good evening. My name is Ali Seidel de Rivero, and I am a new resident in Montgomery County. While my fiance was born and raised in Rockville, we recently moved here from Northern Virginia. The things that drew us to our Aspen Hill neighborhood were access to parks and sidewalks to walk our dog, the stellar reputation of Montgomery County schools, and a quieter, more suburban feel to settle down and hopefully start a family. You mentioned that our partners around the DMV are also doing this and that we're in good company. Arlington County in Virginia and the city of Alexandria are currently being sued for a decrease in property values, despite actually putting this on the ballot. So they are currently being sued despite actually putting this on the ballot and having their citizens vote on it, which to my understanding, Montgomery County will not be doing. My question is this: what makes this plan different from what our neighbors are doing? And how will Montgomery County prevent spending taxpayer dollars in court if this legislation is passed?
Thank you. Thank you. Raise a hand. How you doing? How you doing, sir? I'll come over to you. Yep, I'm looking at you. I'll hold this for you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm originally from New Jersey. My wife is from Bethesda. We could not move into Bethesda. We live in Kensington. In Kensington, what we're seeing happening is these great Cape Cod starter homes are being torn down, and in their place are these McMansions that are going right now on Zillow for 1.6 to 1.8 million, which means you need 400,000 to 750,000. What I'm noticing in our community in terms of this, and I think affordability is important, and I think driving is still essential. But what I would say is this plan, which might have a lot of flaws, is still a step towards trying. What I'm hearing from a lot of people in my town and what I'm hearing a lot on the side is this plan is bad because of parking. I have a feeling if parking was addressed adequately, the next thing is this is a bad plan because of environmental concerns. If that is addressed, it would then be this is a bad plan because we need to historically preserve our white suburban communities because those old Victorian houses look really nice. Moving forward versus not doing anything is very bad. More McMansions are being built, denying everybody access. Attainable housing may not be the right path. It should be affordable housing. But at least this is moving in a direction. Anyone who doesn't want this to move, I just have a feeling it will be one excuse after another because deep down, it's not about change. It's about keeping the way it's always been.
Great. Thank you very much for that. All right. I see your hand raised. I'm going to make my way over. Excuse me. Hello. No problem. I'll hold this for you.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer. I live in Aspen Hill. One of the reasons why we purchased our house was so that it would appreciate in value and then we could afford to retire. That was basically our retirement plan. My question, I have more than one, is what is the council doing or planning to do to make the existing and in the permit pipeline housing affordable to middle and lower income households? And also, is there a plan to extend the transit lines, the red line up into, further up in toward Olney, up and further up into that more rural area, or even out toward Shady Grove and bringing it up more toward Clarksburg, where there's already a lot of development into townhomes, single-family home, planned communities? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to make my way. I see a hand raised here. If you can stand, I'll hold this for you.
Thank you. My name is Kimberlyn Prasad, and I live here in Wheaton. And I'm also the founder of Epic of MoCo, which is empowering people in communities. And I'm not opposed to development. What I'm opposed to is gentrification and removing the people who have been here when everybody else ignored us. I want to read you what the Office of Legislative Oversight said when they did the racial equity analysis. Thrive leads with a vision for economic development that focuses on attracting new businesses and workers to the county who can afford to reside and or work in mixed-use transit-oriented town centers. Yet this economic development approach could widen racial and social inequities as it primarily offers benefits to affluent, disproportionately white people. Now I want to go over what the COG, Council of Governments, said we're supposed to be doing. The housing shortage that we have is affordable housing. That affordable housing is supposed to be built on the transit lines. Instead, the County Council has focused on building 3 years. Was it 3 years, Jason, that you guys worked on this? 3 years. Instead of dealing with affordable housing, they looked at market rate housing, okay? That's not what we needed. That's not what COG said we needed. We need affordable housing, and you're just going to overlook it. Next thing, you're talking about the transit corridors as tear down housing. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you.
Let's be respectful.
We are being respectful, but they're having a conversation.
No, they're listening.
No, they were having a conversation.
Can continue.
So, the transit corridor, and we're living on those transit corridors. There's little houses that you're considering tear downs. That's where we live. That's where people have pulled their money together. That's where people are working 2 and 3 jobs to pay the property taxes that you continue to raise, okay? So that's where I'm coming at, is what have you done? How is this plan equitable? Take a moment to explain that to us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. By a show of hands, I'll be making my way back around. We're going to get to everybody. If we can limit it to about 30 seconds, that'll be great. You had your hand up for a while. Thank you. I'll hold this for you, okay?
My name's Martha Jenkins. I've lived in the same house for 80 years in the Forest Glen area. And I'd like to know what your plan is for the infrastructure for transportation. You've got George Avenue with the bus lane. Now traffic is packed up on the rest of the other 2 lanes. We have narrow streets. Our houses were built in the 30s and 40s. Our streets are narrow. Looking out my door, I can see 6 rental houses right around me that have been bought or held by owners hoping for an escalation in price. Those houses, some of them are not being well taken care of. And this is what's going to happen. Why should I, at 80 years old, invest more money in my house when it's possibly going to be torn down in a few years when I die and move? You're causing blight. We've been trying to get the Forest Glen Metro tunnel for years, and we promised the money and promised the money, but it never materializes. We can't ride our bikes and walk to stores. How do you carry your groceries back home? Fighting the Beltway, Georgia Avenue, and all of that. We have to have cars because the transportation infrastructure is not here. We're not New York that had the subways and then built around them. We don't have that. And so you are forcing your horrible plan on us homeowners that have put our life savings and work into our homes. And if the house next door to me is torn down and there's some kind of ugly building built next door, that's going to decrease the value of my house. And that is not right. Our streets are too narrow. If we have 2 cars parked across from each other on our streets, a truck, a bus, a fire engine can't get through.
Thank you.
That's what you're going to cause.
Thank you for your comments.
More headaches for all of us. I cannot imagine the headaches that you all are causing in the council.
Okay.
You all as the planning board. These little jutting out things in the middle of the road to turn around the corner.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you.
For your comments.
Okay. We're going to get to as many people as we can this evening, guys. So if you can, by a show of hands, I see your hand raised here. If you can stand, I'll hold this for you, okay?
My name is...
Let's
Okay.
let other people speak, please.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to try to get to everybody. So if we can just let who's speaking on the mic speak. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is April, and I've lived in all kinds of housing. I've lived in apartments in D.C. when I was younger. I lived in a beautiful house on the prairie in Kansas. I live in a house now down county, and God forbid you'll all start throwing stuff at me. I live in Chevy Chase, although it's the county part, not the village. But anyway, but the point is, I live in a 2,000 square foot house. There was a 2,500 square foot house across the street. It got torn down, of course. But in my opinion, it was a fixer-upper because they were sturdy old houses. A developer came in because they have all the cash, and that's who the young folks like my kids who can't afford a house are dealing with. These companies come in, they can pay 100% cash, and they can beat everyone's price of individual homeowners. They bought it, they tore it down, and there is now a 5,000 square foot house standing there. I don't know where they got the money, but a young couple with no kids bought it because they probably couldn't find another house, where they wanted to live. I don't know. But my point is, why doesn't the county, I understand this plan, I'm in favor of affordable housing, I'm in favor of attainable housing, but I think the county could stanch all this McMansioning of all these reasonably priced houses all over the county if you would go back to zoning and say, put a limit on how much bigger the next house can be if someone tears it down. So instead of it being 100% bigger, yeah, you have to keep the footprint, but it can't be any bigger. If it was 2,500 square feet, you can't make it more than 3,000 square feet. And that would stop. And then maybe some younger folks would be able to afford those slightly smaller houses. I don't know, in the neighborhoods. And the other thing would be, has the county thought about giving developers money or land so they would make a little more money on building smaller houses? Like, if people want to live in a single family house, I don't think they should be denied the opportunity. And I don't care what color you are, but maybe if the county has land, they could give a developer or help subsidize, they wouldn't have to pay so much for the land, and they wouldn't need to jack the prices up and build these giant houses to justify a big price.
We do that too. Just to be clear, I had a bill on co-location of housing on county-owned land, and we provide significant amounts of subsidy. It was said earlier, I didn't want to get into a discussion or debate. That's not why we're here, but we have invested more money over the last 6 years in subsidizing affordable housing than in any 6-year period in our history. I have championed that and have advocated for that. We'll continue to do so. I just want to make sure I responded because it was a specific question.
Thank you, Council President. We had a question here. If you can go ahead and stand, I'll hold this for you, okay?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Mikey Franklin. Like 1 in 3 people in this county, I'm a first-generation immigrant. I feel really blessed to live here. I think this is a wonderful place to live, and I believe there is room for more people in our county. I support this plan because I want more neighbours, more first-generation immigrants like me, more people who might need to leave where they live somewhere else in the United States. If you live somewhere where there aren't abortion rights, you might want to move to Montgomery County. If you've got a trans kid and they're not safe in school, you might want to move to Montgomery County. And I support this plan so that people are able to do that. Like I say, 1 in 3 people in this county was born somewhere else. 1 in 3 households in this county also rents. And I don't think anyone who's spoken this evening has said that they are a renter. I now own a home, but I was previously a renter. And when we have a greater housing stock, like this plan proposes, it's better for renters and for homeowners. All different kinds of people come together in this county. And that's what makes it such a wonderful place to live. Change is hard. Change is scary. But the status quo isn't working for so many people, for young people, for first-generation immigrants, and this plan is a step in the right direction. We have room for more people here. When we have this blessing, let's share it with new neighbors.
Thank you for that. Okay, I see a gentleman here with his hand raised, and I can come to you as well. I'll hold this for you, okay, sir?
Hi, I'm Jeff Lesbrance, and I live in South Four Corners, and in a single-family home that I bought about 20 years ago. And I was very lucky to have purchased it from a woman who was effectively born in that house that was built in the 50s. I certainly couldn't afford to buy that house today. I think this plan has good bones. I believe it is well-intentioned. In my neighborhood, or adjacent to my neighborhood, is Holy Cross Hospital. I would love all of the staff there to be able to buy a house in my neighborhood. This plan doesn't sound like it's addressing that need that we've heard from a lot of other folks here. We're addressing attainable, not affordable. I have to double down on that. Parking is a big problem. I don't need to say more about it. A lot has been said, but I would double down on that. If you're answering questions, I want to ask, the plan addresses or defers adequate public facilities to an ordinance and the growth and infrastructure policy, as those exist today, do they address the expanded needs of public facilities that this plan would implement? Because it feels like we're already behind.
All right, well, why don't we do one is
other-
okay. Yeah, briefly.
And then I think someone mentioned that we're not voting on this plan directly, but I think it's on the ballot.
Thank you for that.
So appreciate it. Why don't we quickly, the attainable versus affordable housing has come up a lot, so let me ask Jason to speak to that briefly. And then we're going through the growth and infrastructure policy actually right now, separate from this policy, but there's obviously some overlap. So I'll let Jason talk about the planning department's approach to that, and then we'll have Jordan go to the next question.
Sure. Just real quickly, we've acknowledged all along that this is not affordable housing, it's attainable housing. It's going to be unique to each and every neighborhood, right? So the price point for a duplex is not going to be the same here as it would be in Bethesda or Chevy Chase or Fairland. The idea is they would be more affordable than the replacement home that would otherwise be built. In terms of growth and infrastructure policy, that largely it looks at schools and transportation infrastructure. Today, a single-family home that exists and is torn down and is replaced, there is no test of infrastructure adequacy for that new home, which could be 3 times, 4 times larger. They don't have to pay an impact tax either, because you're taking one home and you're replacing with one home. If a duplex were to be built, they would have to pay an impact tax because now you're replacing one unit with 2. And so there would be an impact tax payment that would go towards and help with infrastructure.
Thank you for explaining that. Show of hands, I saw your hand up for a while. You can go ahead and stand. I'll hold this for you, okay?
My name is Karen Fadley. I grew up in Carroll County. And I want to thank you for holding the listening session. These are very complex problems, and they affect not only Montgomery County, but the entire state. I'm an environmental professional that moved to Kensington 5 years ago with my family of 4, and we still have just one car because we live about a mile from the metro and MARC train and stuff like that. I am in support of this policy because I'm an environmentalist, because I think this has a vision to not impact the rural, forested areas of our state. I have right now on my staff government families that are traveling in from Carroll County, from Pennsylvania, from West Virginia, because they can't afford a home in our area. And that's sad. So we have to address the housing stock. I think that this is a really great first step. I know that everybody is afraid of their cars, but that evidence is that the only way to improve congestion is to get rid of your car and get on a bike. I'm happy to show anyone my cargo bike where I cart my children to school in and do my grocery shopping in. It is amazing, and I do it here in Montgomery County. Yes, absolutely.
Let's be respectful of comments, please. Thank you.
But I want to say yes, and obviously there are equity issues and affordable housing issues that still need to be addressed, but I appreciate the vision that this plan has for our county.
Great, thank you, thank you. Raise a hand. I did see this gentleman's hand here raised for a while. I'll go ahead and hold this for you.
I want to repeat some of the things that other people said, but the environmental issues and the infrastructure issues and school issues, none of which are really addressed in the plan. And secondly, I think the whole plan is dependent on our system of market and the capitalism, and just the system that got us to where we are today. The developers that I've seen in our neighborhoods buy the least expensive house, build a house that's more expensive than the most expensive house, and sell it. And I think when they do it with duplexes, they can make each of the duplexes very expensive too. It's not like they're going to buy an $800,000 house and then sell 2 $400,000 houses. They're going to make money. I mean, that's what they want to do, is make money. And I think this plan depends on them to be nice people and not make so much money.
Thank you. Thank you. I saw your hand up here. How you doing this evening?
I'm just fine.
I'll hold that for you.
Okay, my name is Elizabeth Joyce, and I live in Silver Spring. I want to raise a question about, I think, a false choice that's been presented here tonight. This plan or nothing. No one here is saying this plan or nothing. I would just pose to you a question. What alternatives did you look at when you started this whole process of planning? Because from what I've seen, and I've followed very carefully for 3 years, you started with a very narrow model and pursued that through Thrive and now through this. The use of language is very important. Attainable, as far as I can tell, means affordable for anybody who can afford it. And we're talking about market rate housing. And yet, as everybody has said, the need, as COG has identified, is for affordable housing. And this will create market housing. When you did the missing middle study in Silver Spring in 2020, it turned out that the triplexes and so on would start at $750,000, and that was back then. Now it's now. And like the gentleman who thinks that areas with the less expensive land are going to be further impacted disproportionately, I'm really concerned about that too. Also, what about unintended consequences? Absentee landlords, as this gentleman over there said, come in and buy houses. They buy the cheapest houses, and they try to sell them for a very high price. And if they don't get the price, they often sell them to private equity companies. And that has happened to the house right next to me in East Silver Spring. And it's been empty for 2 years. And the grass is going this high, and this kind of neglect is really a problem. And this house has been empty for 2 years. So this is the kind of thing. You know, Daniel Perolic, who wrote the book on missing middle, he has 9 categories of where missing middle should be. And single-family houses is number 9. So all sorts of information that we should have and we should be discussing, serious questions, fact-based questions, need to be answered. I'm glad you're having this session, but we need many more, and you need to entertain these concerns that people have.
Great. Thank you. Okay. I did see this lady's hands up for a while. I'll go ahead and I'll make my way over to you. If you can stand, I'll hold this for you, okay?
Okay. My name is Samdang. I live in Rockville. Thank you for this opportunity for my suggestion or my idea. I came as a refugee 43 years ago, worked very hard. Now I can afford the house in Rockville. But we just learned about this program recently, and I heard that you're going to vote in October. That scares me because what you vote, and I heard a lot of people not too happy about this program. My great concern is I live in a single house. If my neighbor live in a single house too, they add up a lot, and then they're gonna have 10 cars in front of their house, and I have 1 car. I think this program's gonna turn the neighbor against neighbor, because when you get up in the morning to go to work, you can't get out of your own house. What are you gonna do? And people are gonna get into argument, go to court, etc. And we should save the money to buy the food or take care of the children, send the kid to eat healthy food, etc. I used to work for public health myself. I retired 7 years ago, and I knew a lot of public. They talking about scared to death about this program. So I would suggest that please do not vote in October, because we have only 2 months to think about that.
Great.
We're glad you're here. Just to clarify for you and for everybody here, there is no legislation that's before the council currently. We will definitely not be voting in October, because we literally couldn't even do that if it was introduced tomorrow, based on our timeline, and nothing is being introduced tomorrow. The whole reason why we're doing these sessions, which was very important to me and to the rest of the council and to the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. We had 3 Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee sessions where the Planning Board briefed us in public sessions over the summer. And now we're doing community listening sessions to hear from the community. At some point, it's likely that legislation will be before us, but it'll go through the formal legislative process. There'll be a public hearing. We have a fairly long timeline, and certainly no votes in October, because we literally couldn't even do that at this point. So we're not rushing this. We are taking a methodical approach. You saw we have listening sessions for the next couple of weeks, and no legislation is going to be introduced certainly before the listening sessions are completed. So that concern that you heard is not an accurate concern, but I appreciate that you've raised it here so that we could clarify. So thank you.
Thank you for explaining that, Council President. I see a few hands raised. I'm going to get to you guys. This gentleman had his hand raised. I'll hold this for you, okay?
Thanks very much. My name is Joe Shashadi. I live in Silver Spring. So I'm glad that you're talking about governance, because I have some concerns about the governance of the process here. The lady in blue had described that there weren't perhaps robust options considered, so that the council had several things before it that they could choose from and that we could evaluate. I think that what I hear, I understand she said October, and I understand it's not going to be October, but honestly, January is also probably pretty rushed in this kind of process, if that's what we're aiming at. I would say give it a cycle to make sure that any group that might want to put it on the ballot has an opportunity to do so next year. This was dropped just after, basically. You would have to have gathered that to put it on this year's ballot. I think that, a lot of people have talked about infrastructure. My thing is schools. I worry that we're doing blanket here when you could do things a little bit more pinpoint, in that you could take what you're suggesting and you could ensure that it only applies where you have the infrastructure, that that you are, if you do consider something, you leave it with a rolling sunset where you could pull it back if it isn't working. And that we make sure that we understand the impacts fully as a community. And an example of that would be the interaction with the recently passed state law that awards bonus densities. So these are some of the concerns that I have. I'd like the process to be more robust and to allow much, much more interaction with us before we move forward with it.
Great, thank you. All right.
We did ask for the question of the interaction between the governor's bill on bonus density and its interface during the committee session. That's something that we'll get follow-up on. A number of the other questions that have been raised here are also questions that have been raised previously. Some are new questions. That's all going to be considered as part of our discussion. And just to clarify again, we have recommendations from the planning board. That's what has come before us. The council can take all, some, or do nothing, or do something completely different from what is before the recommendation. So that's what we have before us. We're getting comments on what the recommendations are. It's not a take or leave. This is a recommendation, and the council has to vote up or down on those recommendations. It's part of the legislative process, but I appreciate the comments.
Great, thank you, Council President. I saw this hand raised for a while. I'll hold this for you, okay?
Thank you. Good evening. So I've lived here since 1989 when my dad decided to move us from Hyattsville, Maryland. And my question is, because I know I'm a first generation immigrant. I know a lot of people around this area who are living with their parents as well as I am. And, we all help out around the house, being a Latina. And my dad is finally, paying down his home that he's been working so hard for. How is this going to affect us who still I live in a duplex here in Wheaton. How is this going to affect us who are still, this is a house that I am inheriting. I'm not opposed to growth. I'm not opposed to attainable housing or affordable housing, however you want to call it. But how is that going to affect us who are inheriting these properties and want to continue living around this area and benefit from this growth that's happening?
Great, thank you. All right, by a show of hands here, I'm going to make my way back. I saw this gentleman had his hand raised for a while as well. Okay, sir, if you can stand, I'll hold this for you.
Thank you. I am a refugee from Bethesda, and I'm here because the listing session for Bethesda is sold out, and I imagine that it's been sold out to members primarily of the town of Chevy Chase, because that's the voice that gets heard in discussions like this. So I'm here to speak. I am a retired firefighter. I live in a group house in retirement. I've never lived outside of my family in any other housing arrangement but shared arrangements. I lived in the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad dormitory for several years as a volunteer. And people today live in fire stations, not just hang out there or go there for duty assignments, live there. They actually live there. 15% of career firefighters live in Montgomery County because of the lack of affordable choices. So I support this plan. I am not afraid of its unintended consequences, but I am because I don't think they're very real. What I think is going to happen is that we are going to find that there's going to be a slow rollout of people choosing this option to build duplexes or other styled housing on what is now single-family zones. So I would like to see support to incentivize builders, to give them support and give property owners, homeowners support in order to make these transitions more feasible. I am car-free, and I live in Bethesda with two other people who are also car-free. One does not speak English. My next door neighbor, to sum up, my next door neighbor could not find a house suitable to move into in Bethesda in the same school district for his two kids. So he tore down his house next to mine and rebuilt it about 3 times as big. All the houses on my tiny street are Cape Cods of about 1,800 square feet. He built one that was as big as you could build it. It's got solar panels on it, quite a different style. It only has one front door. Those two kids are going to college this year. So that house is going to be basically empty. It could have 2 families in it. And in Bethesda in particular, housing size, family sizes have decreased. So as a firefighter, I don't see the infrastructure issue of parking because I'm a firefighter. I know what the streets in all the communities are like, and this is not an issue.
Thank you, sir. All right. By a show of hands, I'm going to make my way down the aisle here, okay? I'll go ahead and hold this for you, and then I'll make my way over there, okay?
Hi, I'm Sarah Redinger. I'm wearing a few hats tonight. First and foremost, I am a resident of Glenmont. I live in a single-family home. I am also the Vice President of Housing and Community Strategies with Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland, as well as on the Executive Committee of the Montgomery Housing Alliance. So every single day, I work with families that struggle to find and maintain affordable housing in Montgomery County, and I support the Attainable Housing Strategies. We need as many tools as we can possibly get working in tandem with one another to create affordable housing and adequately house all of our neighbors. And if I can build 2 units rather than 1, the subsidy per unit is lower and I can build more affordable housing. So as this moves forward, we would love to see incentives for the creation of more deeply affordable units, as well as mechanisms to prevent displacement, but we do support the Attainable Housing Strategies and hope it moves forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I do see hands. We have to make our way around the room, so I'll make my way back over here, excuse me. I saw a hand over here. If you can raise your hand here, I'll make your way over to you. Again, we're trying to get to as many people as possible, so we're making our way around the room, okay? I'll hold this for you, thank you.
Right there is my neighbor, so
He's had his hand raised for a long time.
Okay, got it. All right, I'll hold this
In
for you.
fairness, I asked Jordan to make sure she made it around the
Okay.
room as much as possible so we could hear from as many viewpoints as possible. So you can
Jim,
blame me.
I'll
I
be
think
quick.
she's doing a great job. Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Tom, lifelong resident of Montgomery County. I grew up in the mean streets of Chevy Chase Village, and I now live in Four Corners, Silver Spring, and have lived there for 30 plus years. I just had a question for you all. Has there been any consideration to approaching commercial property owners in the county? I mean, I was on an advisory committee back in the 90s for downtown Silver Spring. It's pretty much the same as it was then. I mean, it's blight. There's empty stores. White Oak is blight. Parts of Aspen Hill, even parts of Bethesda are blighted. Why don't we utilize some of the commercial, at least give them incentives maybe to turn it over for residential purposes? And that, not just apartments, I'm talking about maybe even townhomes, you know, 2-level apartments possibly, some diverse housing options for people in those areas. There's plenty of land that is commercially zoned right now.
Separately, we are looking at those issues too, both at the Economic Development Committee, the question of what to do with our vacant commercial properties. We have similar commercial vacancies to other jurisdictions, but serious challenges. And then on the zoning side, which is the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, of how we can look at the zoning options and see if we can address them as well. So we are looking at that as well. Thanks for the comments.
Great, thank you. I'll hold this for you, okay?
Okay. I'm Tina Slater. I'd like to say that I do support this plan. I've lived in the county a long time. I graduated from Robert E. Peary, 1965. It's in the Aspen Hill area, or it used to be. And I live in downtown, or I live in Silver Spring near Wayne and Sligo Creek, and we have a whole mix of housing there. We have several high-rises. We have brick apartments built after World War II. There are some townhomes. There are single-family homes, and we all manage to get along. We see each other at Panera. We see each other in the park, and it's a nice place to live, and I think it works really well with all different housing styles. I'd be happy to see fewer McMansions or teardowns happen and a duplex or a triplex take their place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll come to you now, all right? You're welcome. I'll hold this for you, okay? If you can stand, that'll be great.
Mark Elrich said that, as required by law, they had to do an impact analysis. And I hope I'm not misquoting him. He said it was going to, the study said it was going to cost between $1 and $2 billion. Now those numbers were dismissed out of hand by, at that time, a member of the council and a member of the planning board, but they didn't give any numbers of their own. They just said, no, that's too much. So have you all done an impact analysis? If not, why not? If so, can we see it? And lastly, if his numbers are right, $1 to $2 billion, if you drop that on the heads of the taxpayers in this county, you're going to be making this county a whole lot less affordable, not more affordable.
I think the comment is in reference to Thrive 2050 plan, not the Attainable Housing Strategies. I think there's been some conflation of those two issues, but there was an impact study that was done on Thrive. We can certainly follow up with you on that, but it's a separate issue.
Okay. All right, well.
A question, let me turn it over to Jason to answer that.
Sure. So the county has requirements for certain types of impact analyses to be conducted whenever there's a new bill or a new zoning text amendment. In this case, there is no zoning text amendment that we have yet. When any potential legislation comes from this, it'll go through all of the analyses that are required.
Great, thank you for that. Show of hands, any more questions? Okay, I saw your hand go up first here. All right, I'll hold this for you.
Thank you. Actually, I had a few things to say, but listening tonight, one thing missing from this presentation is, say, a sample analysis of, like, a developer purchases a home for this, and then it costs them this to tear it down and this to build it up, and then this is what he'll sell it for. I would think that something like that could be done so we could see exactly what you're talking about. Also, I wonder if it would help to tax renters so that those houses would be put on the market for sale, you know, another thing. I wonder if we could make an exception for people that just want to do it for family members, you know, and say live there for a certain number more years, and, you know, they could get some kind of a, you know, not a developer, but someone, the people that really have family concerns. I don't understand, if we have such dire housing needs, why this is confined to this corridor. I mean, there are places outside the corridor, there are plenty of people that can't take public transportation to work. Teachers, policemen, landscapers, house cleaners, they need to take equipment. I don't understand, if it's such a dire situation, why is it such a small area that's being considered? And then the last thing I'd like to say is, I live in the Forest Glen area, like my neighbor Martha here, and there's an apartment building that the planning board just approved this year, with right on top of the Forest Glen Metro Station, with 450 parking spaces in it that empties onto a residential street. So it is mythology that people aren't going to use their cars in these areas. I mean, either they're not going to use their cars and we don't have 450 parking spaces, or they are going to use their cars. So someone really needs to decide what this parking situation is, because our streets are extremely crowded. We have to pay for residential parking because we're near a metro, you know. So I don't think anyone has really confronted that issue.
Sure. I just want to offer one quick clarification. So, Lisa, if you don't mind, if we could just go back to where we show the zones. So the focus on the corridors is really because that's where we're saying the largest potential and where we have multiple forms of transportation. And so it's where, if we can concentrate our growth along corridors where we have that, where we have access to transit, where we have bike lanes and other opportunities like that, it's the greatest thing that we can do in terms of trying to reduce greenhouse gases. The other thing I want to point out, our recommendations for duplexes, triplexes are everywhere here in the yellow. Okay, so it's not just the duplexes and triplexes would be allowed in all of the zones that you see here in yellow, not just on the corridors.
Great, thank you for explaining that. We're going to move on to the next question. I did see your hand up. I'll hold this for you, okay?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Jim Epstein, and I currently live in a single-family home that for the last 25 years that I'm lucky enough to own. Before that, I've lived in a garden apartment. I've lived in a townhouse, all here in Montgomery County, and I did live in Adams Morgan for a while. I don't want to take up too much time because the Miami Dolphins are on, so got to go watch that. And I really don't want to address the issues, although I have a few concerns about the by right, and I happen to live in a cul-de-sac that was a single-family home that now has 6 or 8 units in it, with everybody has a car, so that then went through foreclosure. Anyway, what I really want to do is issue a challenge to both the planning board and to the council. And what I want to say is we really appreciate having these kinds of listening sessions. Personally, I believe that a lot of it is because a lot of people believe that Thrive was pushed right through during COVID. The perception is there wasn't as much outreach, and so maybe this is part of the response to that, which is wonderful. But the challenge is that the county has a real good ability to present opportunities for the public to express himself at times. But very rarely is any action ever really taken on those things. And so my challenge is that I would hope that if it's out of the planning board's hands now and it's at the council's hands, that the council really listens and that we see some changes maybe to this plan that reflect that you are listening to what the community has to say. Because yes, we need a variety of housing stock. We need people that can afford it, and we need housing that people can afford, which doesn't exist now. That's not my conversation. My conversation is the fact that a lot of these kinds of situations seem to be great lip service to giving outreach and very little changes on the back end, or justification of the positions is really presented to the public. So that's really my challenge. I guess it's really to the council at this point in time. And I hope that even though we'll have public hearings and all of that kind of stuff, that we really see some changes that reflect that you're listening to the community and not just giving us an opportunity to flap our lips.
Appreciate that. Is absolutely the intention. That is why we're here. That's my commitment. I know that's Natalie's commitment. I see her nodding her head, and that's why we have all the staff that we have here. So just so you know, if we were just here to nod our head and whatever you say goes in one ear and out the other, we wouldn't have asked our huge teams to come here and to be taking notes and to be doing the follow-up. So I want to thank the staff who are here because they're really the ones that are going to help us to make sure that we're keeping track of this.
Thank you.
There is a new regime at planning. There is a new regime at the council. Let's allow that change.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. I have Tyreek on my fantasy team, so I'll be watching too.
Great. Thank you for that comment. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. I saw your hand raised. I'll hold this for you, okay?
Thank you. Hi, I've lived in Montgomery County for 35 years. First of all, I want to thank you for being here, for taking the issues seriously, for presenting a plan, and for listening to all of us. I appreciate that. I actually attended the listening session last night in Silver Spring. I listened, and I didn't have a chance to speak then, so I wanted to do it tonight. Last night and also tonight, there are a lot of people who are saying, I'm a renter, I can't afford to buy in Montgomery County. Some people are saying, I can't even afford to rent in Montgomery County. Or they're saying, my relatives can't afford to live here in Montgomery County. And what it all comes down to is that there isn't enough reasonably priced housing. In other words, housing priced below the current market rates. And a lot of these people were very jazzed up about this proposal, but I don't understand why, because what this proposal is going to do is create more market rate housing. And the people who couldn't afford market rate housing now aren't going to be able to afford that new housing either. I'm going to sell my house, and the developer's going to come in and put 2 or 3 or 4 units on it, and they're all going to be sold for much more than a single-family house would be, and more for what the developer paid for it. This afternoon, my husband and I drove past 4500 Walsh Street in Bethesda, and by the way, there was a gentleman over here who said he thought that it would be these areas, they would be the only ones that are impacted, or they would be disproportionately impacted. I think you'll find this is going to happen in Bethesda and Kensington and all sorts of areas. At 4500 Walsh Street, 2 years ago, a developer bought a single-family home for $1.6 million, and today he's turned it into 3 units in a triplex, each on the market for 3.650. Now, maybe he won't get it. Maybe he'll only get $3 million per unit times 3. I don't know. But the fact is, I don't see how this is going to result in lower price housing that any of those people that I've just told you I agree I'm concerned about are going to be able to afford. So who is going to benefit from this? The developer clearly is. Maybe the county will. You'll have a higher tax base. That's good. Maybe I will when I go to sell my house in 5 years because we're getting old, and maybe the developers will get into a bidding war and bid up the price of my house. But it won't benefit any of the people who want to move in. I think that County Executive Mark Elrich has been pretty clear in saying that he opposes this measure for this reason and others. And in case anybody's going to try to school me on supply and demand, I understand that the new housing stock is going to be rolling out slowly over a period of years. It's not as though this initiative is going to produce such a big, sudden increase in inventory that it's going to drive down market price.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for your comments and for coming both nights. Really do appreciate it.
Exactly. Do we have any more questions? A hand, I saw you had a question. Let me see if anybody else, okay? Any more questions? I don't think you, had your hand raised, so I'll hold this for you, okay?
Okay, thanks. I'll make this very brief. It accords with questions that have previously been asked, but I think it's important. On slide 5, there were some pretty dramatic claims. One of them was that embracing this plan is the right thing to do. It's going to promote equity. I want to promote equity, but I don't understand, after listening for almost 2 hours, how this plan is really going to generate more opportunities for historically disadvantaged groups. I think that's in need of explanation.
Jason, explain.
So just real quickly, again, I go back to those numbers that every single zip code, purchasing a home in every part of Montgomery County is harder today than it ever was before. And what we're seeing is the people who can afford to buy, and it's not just developers who are coming to the table with cash. There are individuals that are coming to the table buying homes with cash. And that is pushing out anyone who needs to have a mortgage. And it's just, the more exclusive our neighborhoods become, the only people who can afford to live there are people who are independently wealthy or have generational wealth. And historically,
Recreation Center, the time is now 8:20.
I was like, Jordan, what?
Who has the mic? Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're just going to actually let people on the mic speak, guys, if we can just be respectful, okay? Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to take this question. We'll ask Jason to clarify to the extent that he can, and then we're going to wrap up because you can hear we got to let the rest of the staff that runs the building get home as well. And have to
Okay,
clean
so
up,
let's take this question here. I saw your hand raised for a while.
Yes, I just would like to know if there's a deadline for input and questions to be submitted to the county council regarding their feelings about this issue.
There's no deadline. There's no legislative proposal currently before us. Generally, what happens when there is a legislative proposal, there is a deadline on the public record officially, but you can always continue to reach out to the council after that. It just may not be able to make it into a formal packet just because of timelines, et cetera. But you can always reach out to the council and share your feedback, as well as to the planning department. We'll make sure we put back up the contact information here as well. And if you signed in, I'll remind everybody, if you signed in, we'll send you the information from tonight as well, and you can weigh in that way as well.
Thank you, Council President. We have time for one more question. I saw your hand raised for a while. I'll go ahead and hold this for you, okay?
Okay. I've been a resident of the county for well over 50 years. I've owned a home for close to 40. My question is related to what you just spoke about in terms of cash buyers. I wanted to know, is there any type of limit on the number of developers or investors that can purchase these homes? The reason I'm asking the question is, it's my understanding once the number of investors in the community exceeds a certain limit, that those homes can no longer be purchased with mortgages because those are not conforming mortgages for Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So you're causing a problem where the only way you can buy a home, if it exceeds that amount, is by cash. So that's going to create a problem for individuals as opposed to something that's going to benefit investors and the private equity firms that are purchasing these homes in these communities. So I want to know, is this something that has been addressed? Is there a county database whereby we could determine the percentage of investors in given communities so we can determine whether or not people will be priced out of these communities that you're speaking of?
I'll just unpack that quickly as best as I can. The county doesn't have the ability to distinguish who or what entity buys property or really buys anything. There was an effort at one point at the state level on institutional buying and whether or not that could be a restriction. There are other states that have looked at this as well. It's a very murky legal question because property rights and property ownership is a question, and it's hard to differentiate, for instance, between a trust or an estate that could be a family's ownership over a home or a way to pass it on or keep it in your family versus BlackRock or some hedge fund or something like that from a institutional standpoint. But that is something that has been looked at and is an open area of interest, but not something that we can control or we can handle here at the local level. But I appreciate you raising it. In terms of database, tax records are public, and who owns property is public. You can go on the county's website and see that. You might not be able to see the exact financial dynamic of each and every entity and person, but you can see who owns it and whether it's a person or an entity that is on the public tax rolls. And in terms of how much of an issue this is in Montgomery County or in Maryland, there have been some studies and some data to look at this question of institutional buying, like hedge fund buying of single-family homes, for instance. And that's something that I've requested more information on, and I hope that as we take this up, we'll have more data and more information on that as we move forward. It came up last night as well. It's something that I've asked about prior to last night as well. Let me turn it over to Jason to clarify and follow up on the comments about how this plan, as proposed by the Planning Board, intends to address the equity issue, not for the purposes of the debate, but by purposes of it was requested multiple times. And then we're going to wrap up.
So I think the key thing here is that what we have in place today is restrictive zoning. Single-family zones only allow one type of product, a single-family detached home. And when you restrict the zoning like that and you restrict what you can have there, you're restricting the supply. So right now, when a home is replaced, and it's happening more and more across all communities in the county, what we're getting are these 4,000 square foot units. A 4,000 square foot unit, I guarantee you, is going to sell for more than a 2,000 square foot duplex unit. So the idea of allowing the duplex is that duplex is going to be more affordable, more attainable to more households that would not otherwise be able to buy in that neighborhood. A home that is not in that ripe spot for being torn down and redeveloped will still be on the market without being torn down, and will still be available at their price points. It's the lower end price point houses that are currently ripe for being torn down and replaced. Right now, the only option is that much larger single family home, which definitely is not going to be attainable to people. So that's really what this is about. I also highlight the the attainable housing optional method for the medium scale. That is where we're talking about restricting to an average unit size of 1,500 square feet. So when we hear about these townhouses that are being built, I guarantee you these townhouses are 2,000, 3,000 square foot townhouses that are going for those insane prices. So when you're restricting it to 1,500 or even lower, you're going to get more affordability, more attainability for our neighborhoods.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. I want to acknowledge that Michelle Whitaker, Councilmember Jawanda, the third member of our Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee's Chief of Staff, has now joined us as well. I just want to thank her for joining. Thank you to everybody for coming. I want to especially thank all of the planning staff who are here and who helped put this together, the council staff, the council PIO team. Thank you to Jordan for making it all the way around the room and making sure that as many voices were heard as possible. Have a great evening. If you request it, we're happy to provide it for you. If you don't have a computer or access to a computer on the way out, if you ask staff, we can get you the presentation. There are paper copies of the Kim, there are paper copies of the presentation in the back, and staff can provide you with additional ones. If folks could do their best to clear the room so that the staff can help put the chairs away along with me, so we can get everybody home at a reasonable hour, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, thank you very much for coming and joining us tonight and for sharing your thoughts and feedback.